So over here, uh, you can see that we are into the view1.xml. So before going to break, we were discussing about the things those are written over here. So basically, I was trying to tell you how we are making the connection. We are first inside the index.html, where we have put our view object over here and placed that view object inside the body of the HTML. This view object is also referenced from here, the namespace. So how does the view name know that there is something over here? So it's you see the path is already mentioned over here. So namespace, how does this namespace know that it is this web app? So I have just put a code over here, data SAP UI resource roots, that tells that now that my web app becomes the current working directory. And then I go to view. So this thing now becomes my current working directory. Then I go to view and view one. So um, at least the body knows about the view one. How? Because I'm placing the body at the view one. So connectivity is made. And then I go to the view1 controller over here. Then I go to view1 over here, and here I have written something that's, you can see that like the things those are written over there. Okay, so what are these things that I have written over here? You can see that I'm calling in a library that is SAP UI Core MVC library. And I'm telling that my view actually belongs to the MVC library. So instead of completely writing SAP UI Core MVC, I'm creating a shortcut for it. So the shortcut is how you can make the shortcut. You have to say the XML namespace, XMLNS, that means XML namespace, and that's giving it a name MVC. I can call it by any name. This MVC could be called by any name. So what I'm saying is that I'm calling this library, giving it a name, and placing the name before the view. So now the view understand that I'm part of MVC library. Now you come over here and check the button. For the button, I'm using nothing over here. You see XML and S, and let's say I make it like M or B or whatever I want to, I can just place it. I don't want to do that. You know why I don't want to do that? Because in the process, I just bought something up. Okay. I don't want to do that because there is one no possibility that it or help that provides that if more of the controls belong to one library, and if I have got most of the controls that belong to sap.m, if you do not pass m before it, let's say m before it, and you just put an m over here. So specifically, it is saying that my button is getting it from sap.m. So by default, it's only for one library. It's possible that if you do not pass it, by default, this button will take from the library that you have made as a default library. So how many libraries? Only one library could be made as a default. So if you're using lots of UI controls, if you're using lots of controls from the SAP UI library, then you need to pass then the UI namespace over here. Since I'm using SAP.m library and most of the controls that I'm going to write over here would fall into the SAP.m, so I'm just leaving it. Rest of the libraries, if I'm going to use some kind of a nickname before it that tells to the UI that this particular control is actually brought from that specific library. So here we are using two of it, one view that is receiving everything from MVC. What is MVC? This whole thing is MVC. I can call it by some other name, some nickname I've given over here for SAP UI Core MVC. Rather than writing this whole thing before it, I'm just passing a shortcut MVC. And this is the way you can make a shortcut. How can you make a shortcut? You can write XMLNS and SAP UI Core MVC. And if this is your shortcut and passing the shortcut before it. Here, you don't need a shortcut because by default, it knows that it's getting from the M library, right? If I use more controls, then I have to bring in more libraries inside it. Let's say, for example, I want to bring some more library inside it. I will use XMLNS. I'll say like my, I'm just giving it a name, my, and I will say this is my library sap.ui dot layout, okay, dot form. Let's say I want this library. So I'm calling this SAP UI layout.form as my. So any of the controls that fall into this thing, this library, would be prefixed by my and followed by a colon, like this, by a colon. So let's say if button was a control that was got from SAP UI layout.form, so I will just place something like this, my I just made. And also for the ending brace also, we'll just place my before it, the shortcut that you're putting before the control's name. And now you're saying that my button is actually coming from this library. So instead of writing the whole thing before the button, you use a shortcut, place a shortcut before the opening braces and the closing tag, opening tag and the closing tag. If you don't do that, then it won't work for you. So this is just for example, I did that. Let me just go back and remove these libraries from there. Now, another thing that you see is that the controller name is given over there, and the name of the controller is namespace. It is saying that there is a controller where that's namespace web app is the namespace. I've given a name, a nickname to the web app. And what is the namespace I've given? Namespace means a nickname. So and the nickname is also namespace. So I told you that over here you can pass any name of your choice, any name of your choice. So I've passed namespace. You can pass any name. So my web app will become that name that you have passed over here, and then it tells me where is my controller. It says that my controller is in the web app folder. That's namespace, and inside the controller, if you go controller and the view one, so then it will come to know about the view one. So here I have made a separate place for the controller, and then I'm going to scaffold it. So I'll talk about that in a moment. sap.ui.define. I'm going to write over here, and there is a particular way of defining it. So I'll just pass a square bracket, and then I will say a function, and then I'll pass how you write a function. A simple way you write a function, part this thing, and then place the function at the bottom. Place the function at the bottom, and then inside the function write use strict, and then end it. This helps in debugging, find some error. Okay, so use strict. If you are in strict mode, it will really check on certain things. Those are provided by use strict. So use strict, and then you say, okay, the controller. So this is called as scaffolding. That means you require a module over here. So how can you do that? First, put a curly brace, and then say, I want a controller module. So sap.ui.core.mvc and controller. And then I made a mistake because instead of dot, it will take a slash every time. So this is how you're going to scaffold things. I'll talk about this in a short moment. And then you're going to pass this controller inside the function. So I'm just taking the whole lot of it inside the function, and that function is going to return it. And I'll say controller dot extend it to my controller, and then there is a separation, and then this bracket. So this is what is the basic template of it is. And let me just do it like that. And let me just tell you what it is. Controller.extend. And I think we need to put over here our name of the controller. So our controller name is name space, namespace dot. Where's the controller? There is the controller. And what's the name of the controller? It's view1. So basically, you see what I'm doing is that I'm asking, this is some sort of object-oriented programming. okay, where you're calling a super class, some kind of a class, controller class, okay. That, and what is the way to call the controller class? You need to, if you want to invoke these things, so that all the capacity, the power of the controller class could be transferred to your own controller, this view1 controller. If you check this thing out, what you're saying is that first you're calling the controller class. And how you can call the controller class every time you want to call any class, rather, inside it, then you need to scaffold it by using slashes over here. So first I'm saying I'm calling some kind of superpower, and that superpower, so it's like one class that is extending its power to some kind of another class, another, like my own controller that I want the same powers that is there in the superclass. So what I'm saying is that first, so this is how you make the structure of it, and you say that controller. So you're calling the superpower, and you're asking it to extend the power of this controller to whom? To my own view1 controller. So you're saying namespace.controller provide me the same power what you have. And why do we need this power? Because this power can do a lot of things for you can write. It will allow you to write all the functions inside it. It will allow you to write all the hook methods that are possible. So one of the hook methods that we know of, if you don't know, let me just write it. It's on its function. So this is how you write an on it function. And before that, even we're going to run the code. And how many of the hook methods or life cycle methods those are there in it? That's called as on it, on before rendering, on after rendering, and on exit. Four hook methods: on init, on before rendering, on after rendering, on exit. And do we use all of it? Normally, we use this on it function. That means when your view is rendered, so before the view is rendered, the on init method is called, because it wants to check that what is the first thing that your view wants to load before it is available for the for the somebody who's looking at it. So for the end user to see. Let's say you want to call some kind of, let's say there is a table, and the table has got data, and that data is connected from the back end. But when the person sits on the app, and when it opens the app, you want the tables to be populated by that data. So how will it populate the data? That means that some functions need to be called so that it can make a call to the backend, and the backend provides the data for that table, right? So without even clicking a button or anything. So in that case, you're going to put your function on init. That means when the user sees the UI for the first time, it should have certain things already before the user, so that later it can do whatever it wants with the data. So if you want to place those kind of a thing without a button press or something, you need to put that on the on init function. So these are the hook methods that I talked about: on init, on before rendering, on after rendering, and on exit. We'll be mostly writing codes on init function, this one, and then our own codes. Those are there for the views. So I'll be having views, and I'll show and I'll tell rather that how other hook methods are required. Be careful in the interview. You'll be asked about, all of a sudden they will say, do you know about hook methods? Or some person can ask about, do you know about the life cycle of the controller? Life cycle of the controller. So at that time, I'm pretty sure that you would go for the answer. What is life cycle of the controller? Or what are the hook methods, right? So you will just start with on init, and then you will stop. So I know there is one on init, but then after that, on before, on after, on exit. So on before rendering, on after rendering, and on exit. These are the four life cycle methods. Those are there in the controller. Okay. So what it is that on init. So before the view is rendered, on it method is called. So let's go into the. So this is the scaffolding template that you're seeing, and every time, whenever you make a view1 a controller, every time you're going to invoke this thing with the same kind of template. Let's say we have got more controllers, we'll invoke the same exact template for the next controller as well. All right. Now, we just want to check the codes that we have written for our view. Is it working or not? So here you see there are mistakes in it. So I just passed some kind of a thing like that. And let's see, we have got the libraries. We did not put any themes right now. And let's go, and now it's time to hit the button. And you see 99% of the times it will not work. Why? Because there are so many linkings in it. You started from index.html and then went to the view, and views connect to the controller, and so many things. So we have to go to the inspect section and see what the problem is. Interestingly, it's not even showing any problem. And that's another interesting issue. So is there a problem or something? Let me just quickly pause the video for a while. Where can I pause the video? Okay.